So I'll jump right in then with the Steve Martin documentary that is airing on Apple TV Plus right now. And I literally just finished it while we were getting ready to record here. And it's really interesting. It's long. So it's in two parts. And the first part really seems like it's almost like the documentary portion of it, where it's, kind of the outside looking in at Steve Martin's life. And yes, they talk to him and they do other stuff, but it really feels like the documentary that was made by a documentary film crew. And then the second half is more like Steve. Like people are with him, they're recording it, but it's really him talking the whole time
Hmm.
about his experiences and things like that. And it's a really interesting documentary because I grew up with Steve Martin, not quite like everybody else, because he was coming up like right at the turn of the 70s, right? So he came up in 69, 70 is when he kind of started his kind of rise. Um, and he started he started at Disneyland. Like his first like job was at Disneyland, which is
Wow.
kind of a trip. And and it's just really fascinating because to me, like I've always known that Steve Martin is like the biggest comic in the world. Like he's the guy that everybody knows knows and loves, right? Like you've seen a Steve Martin movie somewhere along the way in your life, right? Even today's generation, maybe it's only Murders in the Building, right? But he's always been there. Like I've seen, Father of the Bride. I saw L.A. Story. All these movies, The Three Amigos. All these movies growing up that were Steve Martin flicks, and to me, he's like this untouchable TV actor or movie actor. Movie more than TV, really, but like that was his thing, right? And so to watch this number one, to see him come up as a stand-up, even though I knew he did it, like I never saw his stand-up. And watching in it through like today's lens of comedy, I don't know that I would find him that funny.
Oh, gosh. Oh, I don't deserve that, really. We're really lucky the way the human body turned out. If just one thing had been different, life would be totally weird. Like a simple thing, if instead of having two arms, we just had one arm right in the center of our body, that would totally put an end to show business because how would people clap? Be, hmm. Yes, we're having a good time. Another thing, consider how lucky you are to have your mouth where it is. It could have been any place. Imagine a bunch of people sitting in a restaurant. Well, you don't see this very often. Ah!
Because he was really over the top and all that as a comedian. But what really fascinated me about this, because he's again somebody that is so successful, is how unsuccessful it seems like he found himself, or how hard he was on himself, and um, just how he's not an outgoing guy. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He doesn't, he's married now and he has a kid, but before this kid who's young, she's pretty young. I think he had a kid in his 70s. Um,
Hmm.
Before that, like he never had a kid. Like he's just been a bit of a recluse, and it's a really, really fascinating show because or documentary, because it's just like y you think like a person or comic based on their body of work and based on the personality that they put on screen. And he's not that guy. He really is like, a hermit. And he's really, like I said, really hard on himself and really kind of never believed in himself. And so a lot of that came from, his upbringing, which they talk a little bit about in the first half of the documentary. And in the second half, near the middle or near the end, they really talk about it and how his dad moved to LA to become like a screenwriter, I think they said, or to write in some form or fashion. And his whole life he was kind of never really good enough for his dad. Like his dad was super dry and didn't um just didn't ever build him up or give him anything to go with. And it took him a long time to come to terms with that and kind of understand who his dad was and why things were like that. Um, like at one point, he had just finished, maybe it was The Jerk, and he goes on stage and or he finishes the movie, and his dad was at the premiere, and it was either him or his mom that asked his dad, "Oh, what would you think of the movie?" And he's like, "Well, he's no Charlie Chaplin." And it's just like he can't even give him a compliment at the premiere of his movie. And um so like things like that like made him really insecure and made him really um really struggle. And to see him off stage, like he's so calm and quiet and almost sheepish, where if you see his old routines, like he's the wild and crazy guy, like he's super animated. He was a magician at Disneyland, like that's where he started. And so like he did magic shows, and he wanted to be a stand-up, and he wanted to do all this stuff, and how he kind of evolved over time is the basis of the documentary. And the gotcha here is that it's a pretty long documentary. You're talking about over 3 hours worth um of information and footage on Steve Martin. And it's yeah, it's really cool. Like in the first half, even though it's more kind of about him without him talking all the time, it's really about his life up to the point that he became a film star. So the first half is really about his young stand-up comedy days. And it was really fascinating. Like it's a little slow, like it's not long. I mean, it's really long, um, but it's good. Like um, it's really interesting, and it's really fascinating to just see, like I said, somebody that is like so diametrically different than what they put out there. And yeah, I just thought it was really cool. I don't know. I haven't looked on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb to see what it's getting as reviews, but it literally came out yesterday. So it's pretty new. I don't even know if there would be a lot of reviews. But I think, and I'll talk about another stand-up documentary in a minute, or in a little bit, but this one feels like a more complete documentary about a person, not just a comic and not just the stuff, but it's about, if he's 70 something now and he was 20 something when he was really starting to launch. I mean, you're talking about a 50-year career. So he's been doing this for a long time. And it's it's really neat to see. So I would definitely recommend it to anybody that wants to see it. I think um, there's, even though he's so different than the characters he plays, he's just a really interesting guy, and it's just really fascinating. And like how the only person that through this whole thing, besides his wife, who he he really loves, and she really loves him, but the only person that seems to really matter is Martin Short, who he does
Yeah.
Only Murders with the Building in, and they have a show that they do together on stage, like a comedy stand-up kind of thing. And he said this stand-up is so different because he's an adult now. Like when he was doing comedy before, he's crazy. He was young. This one is, they take jabs at each other or whatever, but they have a lot of fun. And there's a point in there where Steve Martin's talking to Jerry Seinfeld, and Seinfeld is like, "Well, what do you do? What like it's terrible. What happens if Martin Short dies?" Right? And he's like, "I'd retire." He's like, "I'd be done." So like for somebody that doesn't have a lot of friends or doesn't care about a lot of people, you can see how important Martin Short is to him, in
Right.
his career. And I don't know that they met too long before they did Three Amigos, which was the late 80s, I think. Um, but they've been friends ever since. They've done a bunch of stuff together. And
Their
um,
Father the Bride together.
yep, yep. Although Steve
Yeah.
Martin's part's pretty, or I was sorry, Martin Short's part is pretty small in Father of the Bride, but he's
Yeah,
hilarious.
he is.
Um, and
And
so,
Father the Bride too. He's
yep,
thrown
yep,
in there as well. But
yeah,
yeah. It sounds like a great documentary, and it's interesting that you bring that up because I watched a lot of his movies growing up. Little Shop of Horrors, where he
Oh
plays
yeah.
the evil dentist
Yep.
boyfriend,
Hmm.
and I mean, Father of the Bride, Cheaper by the Dozen. He's
Hmm.
in many cases like the 90s and early 2000s, America's dad
Yeah.
in many films. So yeah, this is definitely something that I would watch. I can see my father wanting to watch this, just given that he showed my brother and I so many of films growing up and just films that Steve Martin was in. This sounds fantastic. And it's interesting to hear how he's, in many cases, like you said, a hermit and just someone who keeps pretty to himself. But I feel like that's very common for some actors in general. Not
Yeah.
every actor is, out there and extremely extroverted. So that's really interesting. And I did know about him becoming a father for the first time in his 70s, which is, becoming more common, I think, as the years go on, where, some men are waiting later to meet their person and
Yeah.
are having kids later in life. So, yeah, I think this is a really nice development that they put together. And I mean, it sounds like the documentary was a nice depiction and you really got to know him.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was definitely, it's not like something that was made outside of his creative control. Like he is very involved in it. So,
Sure.
you're getting, for the most part, what feels like a very honest telling of kind of his life. It's not like people are pulling things from the news and kind of filling in the gaps or anything. He's there for this
Right.
process and working with them. So
Is he one
it's
of the
really neat.
producers of it
I
or?
have to assume so. Like he's on camera so
Right.
much, um, and talking to the producers and things like that. So or the directors. So I would assume he's a producer.
Yeah,
I think that's more of the work that he does right now.
sure.
Anyways, and yeah, it's really fantastic. It's really neat to see, and I'm glad that it was something that was made while he's alive and can contribute to it because it would
Definitely.
be a different thing if it was just about him and he wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, no, and just making sure that his story is portrayed in a really accurate way and making sure that not only we as the audience get to know what his childhood and just early career looked like, but who is Steve behind the camera? I
Yeah.
think that's fantastic.
Well, and it's really cool too. One thing that is like kind of personal, is that near the middle mark, when he starts to talk about his dad, they talk about a stage play that he wrote called Wasp, which stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right?
Right.
Like and it turns out he wrote that very autobiographically. So the dad is very hard on the son and all that. Well,
Sure.
funny enough, in college, um, I auditioned for the lead in Wasp. I didn't get it. I ended up doing another production, but one of the original hosts of this show, Opie, did get the lead in Wasp. So, I was still involved in the production in a lot of ways, and I was still around it a lot. There was a couple of things that we kind of bounced off each other just in the audition process that he took and really perfected for his part because I was not at the time much of an actor. Like I was just beginning and he had been doing it for a while. So, everything that he did, he put a better, stronger spin on because he had the skill to do it.
Sure.
And it was fun to watch. And it was a really interesting show because it is like a dark comedy, but it's definitely about, you know, um, a dad who is very hard to impress and hard to get feelings out of and all that jazz. So, it's really interesting. So that it was cool to see them talk about that show, which is something that like I said, I have a personal experience with on some level. So that was neat.
Yeah. Awesome. And
Yeah.
how long ago did you hear? Was it just something that popped up on Apple TV for you, or how long did you know about this prior to
I
watching it?
really think I only heard about it like last week. I didn't know it was coming. That's the one thing, like Apple TV isn't really great about promoting a lot of their stuff. Like you just kind of see
On
it.
the spot? Yeah.
Yeah. Like what's the show? It's right on the tip of my tongue, but they have the sci-fi show about the space race, and it's a fictionalized version of the space race.
Hmm.
And it's really fantastic. And it I keep not realizing the seasons are out, and so I've got to go back and find them after they've been out for a little while. But I
Hmm.
think that's one of the reasons that Apple TV is really good about keeping their shows and not just canceling them, kind of like Netflix has a tendency to do. And I think that's because, they understand maybe they're not marketing them as well. Plus, Apple's got a little bit of money, right? They can back something and
Right.
be okay. For All Mankind, that's the name of it.
Okay.
And that show is awesome. Actually, it's really, really good. But yeah, they don't market a lot of stuff. They just kind of, if you have an Apple TV, it shows up across the top, and it'll be like, this is new from Apple TV or whatever. If you go to the Apple TV app,
It will show
you'll see
you.
stuff in there. But if you
Yeah,
don't, it's really easy to miss stuff. I almost could have missed Severance. Did you see that one?
I didn't.
Oh, that one's super good. Um, and that's with Adam Scott. Uh, but that's probably one of the best like sci-fi, but it's not really sci-fi. It's just kind of weird. Like I can't really explain it, but it's basically like in this universe that they're in, even though it feels like modern times, basically you can go to work, and what happens is
Hmm.
you get on the elevator, and it effectively kind of almost like locks your brain. So you are now two separate people. You have the person that goes into work and works all day, and
Hmm.
then when that person punches out, gets on the elevator and comes out, none of what you had to deal with at work you take home. So you go
Sure.
home and you're just happy. You don't deal with anything. And that show is all about, the people that are trapped in this basically trapped inside this work world, eventually kind of want to break out. And it is fantastic. It was one of the best TV shows of I think it was 2022, like right at the end of 2022, and I think it was up for some Emmys. And it was amazing. It's really good. So if you haven't seen that, you should check that out too. But
Yeah,
Apple TV Plus is tough.
I am not subscribed to Apple TV, so
Mm.
I feel like I should because given
It's
the content, I feel like it just got more popular within the past
hmm
year or two. It was always like Netflix, 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 and now
hmm
everything is really just, you know, making its way to other streaming services. Like I didn't have Paramount or Showtime, other than
Yeah.
like when I had Showtime back in the day when, I was at home
Yeah.
watching cable through
Yeah.
my parents' plan. But yeah, that's good to know that Apple TV is really breaking into documentaries and sci-fi. And I mean, they have one of my favorite movies that I've seen in the past couple of years, Coda. Um,
Yeah.
that
That's
came out on Apple TV. So yeah, there's a lot of good content on there. So that's
it's
that's
one
good to
of
know.
the less expensive streaming services too. I want to say it's only like $5 a month. And if you are at the point where you're either buying a
Hmm.
new Apple TV, or you're buying a new iPhone, or you're buying a new iPad, any one
They'll
of
include
those,
it.
yeah, will usually come with up to a year of free service. So,
Cool.
yeah, and it's of all the services, it's one of the least expensive too, which is pretty impressive because they have a lot of really good content on there. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's great.
yeah.
Awesome. Do you want to segue into the other documentary since we're in the documentary
You know what?
realm of
Sure.
might as
So,
well.
yeah, might as well throw it out there.
Yeah,
So on
there's a
Peacock,
theme.
which is just another streaming service, because there's so many, there's a very short special. I have to look up the name. Oh, it's just called Good One. All right. So yeah, so he's got a special on Peacock called Good One, and it is kind of just about his process. Now, if you haven't heard of Mike Birbiglia, he's been around for a long time. He started back in like the Comedy Central Presents days, back in like the late 90s is when I really, or early 2000s is when I really remember seeing him. Um, but he's very much a storytelling comedian, and so His act isn't a bunch of zingy one-liners. He's not over the top. Like, he's super dry and mellow. Um, sometimes some of the tones of his stories are almost a little like sad until he brings you to the end, and so one of his jokes, one of his specials, one of his earliest specials was called "What I Should Have Said Was Nothing," and the joke that gave that name is he's talking about how he's moving into an apartment building in New York.
I'm a comedian, but off stage, I'm really not funny at all. I'm very awkward, and I have a habit of making awkward situations even more awkward. I always give this example, but a few years ago, I was moving a new bed into my apartment, and this woman who lived in the building opened the front door for me with her key, right? And she said, "I'm not worried because a rapist wouldn't have a bed like that." That's how she started the conversation. Now, what I should have said was nothing. What I did say was, "You'd be surprised." And there's nothing you can say after that. It's like, "See you around the building," that kind of thing.
Right. And so, like, but his jokes are all about kind of the uncomfortability of life, if that's a word. And he's goofy, he's awkward, like I said, he's mellow. And so this documentary is really interesting because for me, I remember him as a young comedian coming up, so he's always kind of been the young guy. But he's been around long enough now that there were comedians like Hassan Minhaj, and there was another comedian in the documentary who is escaping me. If I can remember, I'll put it in the episode. But all these people that he's kind of mentoring now. He never really saw himself as that, and everybody's kind of fascinated by his process because the way he works is he'll go and do stand-up shows in between specials. So all his work is going towards building his next special, right? So that he can do it and record it or have his big show. It's not even necessarily the special, but he can do his show that is the show. But what he has in between, he calls the working sessions. So if you go see Mike Birbiglia during the working sessions, he literally have a notebook on stage. He'll be going over jokes, seeing if they work, seeing if they don't work, developing this act as he goes. But it's not the real act. You're seeing bits and pieces and chunks, and you'll see things that won't make it, and you'll see things that maybe will make it but will get edited, or things like that. And so this is really kind of a little different because it's more about the process that he goes through. Yeah, it is a little bit about family life. Like, he grew up with a brother that, like, literally everybody says and not in a funny way. They're like, your brother is the funnier one of the two of you, and even he says, he's like, yeah, my brother's funnier, but he can't do this stage thing, right? So, like, even though the brother is, like, just naturally funnier, like, Mike Birbiglia is the better comic because he knows how to translate these stories and take these things and put them on stage and make them work. And what you find out in the documentary is the reason those things work is because of how hard he works. And Hassan Minhaj talks about, he went backstage and, Mike Birbiglia's got this table, and he laid out on the table are index cards for, like, every joke that he has. And, Mike Birbiglia basically says, he's like, look, if I do the set and I realize that if I take out this joke and the show still works, he's like, I don't need the joke. Right. So he's editing as he goes. And Hassan Minhaj is like, he literally throwing away, like, brilliant work because he doesn't need it. Like, it doesn't fit the show. It doesn't fit the story that he's telling. It's really a fascinating show because it's about, again, it's about the process of the thing and the way that he works, but also how he went from being, the young, funny comedian to now he's mentoring people and going through all that. And this is for, the Steve Martin one is over 3 hours worth of Steve Martin information, and it's great. And you're learning about the man, and it's super fascinating. And you've got all this stuff. This one's condensed. This one's like 45 minutes. Now, granted, you're talking about a comic with maybe 20 years experience,
Right.
versus 50 years, and Steve is on the grandest stage and all this. Like Steve Martin is Steve Martin.
Sure.
And so, Mike Birbiglia maybe is not as fascinating as Steve Martin, but 45 minutes, it goes by really fast, and it doesn't like it almost doesn't feel like enough. Like it could have been longer. I could have watched more, but I
Mhm.
really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really good. It was really neat to see just his process and see him joke. And it makes me want to go see one of his regular shows, but also kind of makes me want to go to one of the working sets. When
Where
I
he tries out new content and
Yeah,
such. Yeah, that's
because I
cool.
went to a Mitch Hedberg show a long time ago, and Mitch Hedberg is the opposite. He is like a punchline comic. Everything is quick and
Planned.
short
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But when I saw him, he was also testing out his jokes. Like, so he had a little notebook, and he would
Oh.
fire off his little one-liners, and if they were funny, he'd make a note or something. But one time, one just bombed, and he's like, "Well, I guess that's," and he's crossing it out. And he was so
Wow.
funny. And that's the other thing that was really interesting is that you see this guy, Mike Birbiglia, who is a storyteller and a kind of a slow burn comic and all that. But his favorite comics growing up were Stephen Wright and Mitch Hedberg, these guys that were, punchline quick onto the next joke and just kept cranking. So it kind of also shows you that comedy's super versatile. Like comedy is all kinds of different. Like I said, if you watch Steve Martin's um, early stuff, he's way over the top. Like he's more over the top than he is in any movie I've ever seen him. Um,
Mm.
and everything's a little crazy and a little zany, and then you've got the one-liners, and then you've got the storytellers and all this stuff. So comedy is really cool. It's really kind of all over the place. But I would say that if it's also subjective. So some people really like, a darker comic like a Bill Burr or something like that. That's, a little more kind of on the edgy side. And I would say that Mike Birbiglia is not edgy.
Hmm.
And you're not going to laugh the entire time you watch his show, but you feel like you're sitting in on a story when he's telling you, when he's doing his routine. So if that interests anybody at all, I recommend finding his shows. One of his more kind of poignant comedy sets that I really like. One of it is called My Girlfriend's Boyfriend, and it's all about how he got together with his wife and kind of the twists and turns that took. Where uh, at one point they were kind of together and they kind of weren't, and then he found out she was dating somebody else because they couldn't figure their stuff out, and he just kind of had to be okay with that. And it's really interesting, and he's also a sleepwalker. And so one of his he wrote a book called Sleepwalk with Me, and then he turned it into a movie. I think I don't think it was a comedy set, but I think it's a movie. Um, and it's he's a cool guy, and like I said, he's one of my favorite comics. So getting to see this special get made. I think Seth Meyers is the one that produced it. And Seth Meyers is definitely in it. And you can tell when he's talking about Mike Birbiglia, like he really looks up to him as a comic also. So it's a really cool documentary. And like I said, short, 45 minutes, and it goes by pretty quick. So I definitely
Awesome.
recommend that one too.
I just looked it up. He did do a Broadway show, Mike Birbiglia, The Old Man in the Pool. It came
Oh,
out
yeah.
last
Yep.
year.
Hmm.
So this was actually on Broadway, and it looks like it was end of 2022 through early 2023. So that's awesome that he has content that is so unique in a way where he's able to tell a story, and it looks like it was a one act solo performance where he was telling, I'd imagine his, have you seen this
I
show
have not seen The
before?
Old Man in the Pool. No.
Okay. So I'm assuming this is it's just his comedian storyteller, Mike Birbiglia, returns with a tale of life, death, and a highly chlorinated YMCA pool. With his unique form of comedic storytelling, he chronicles a coming of age, middle of age story that asks the big questions. Why are we here? What's next? And what happens when the items at the doctor's office that you thought were decorative become quite useful? That's I guess, the synopsis of that. So that's cool. I knew it sounded familiar when
And,
you mentioned it to me because
yeah,
I go through
and
Playbill quite frequently.
yeah, yeah, and that's actually, it looks like right now it's available on Netflix. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Okay.
so
That's good
I'll
to
have to
know.
remember to watch that because it. I like I said, I just love his stuff. Like I really always have, and going back to his earliest Comedy Central sets where he there was a set that
Hmm.
he did at the very end where he had a projector up top and he would show the cards that he made for people as kids, and they were terrible. Like they were so bad, and the way he was able to make fun of himself and and stuff with that, it's great. So I like
That's
him a lot.
awesome.
So
Very cool. Yeah, no, I feel like I have to check him out now, especially if he's been on Broadway, and it sounds like he's got a very unique style that I would
yeah.
much more resonate with than maybe like a Bill Burr type.
Mhm. Who I love. Like
Yeah,
I love Bill Burr a lot. He's one of my favorites too, but
sure.
they're very different, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's the beautiful thing about
Yeah.
comedy and just in general, TV, entertainment, pop culture. There's just such a large spectrum and amount of content out there that you can pick and choose from. So
Yeah.
that's fabulous. Awesome. So I started watching a new show. One of my favorite game shows growing up was Deal or No Deal, which was hosted by Howie Mandel, early 2000s. They brought it back a couple of years ago again, and they now have a game show, reality show mixed into one, and it's called Deal or No Deal Island. It's on NBC. You could also stream it on Peacock, and it's hosted by Joe Manganiello, who is, I believe, in True Blood, and
Hmm.
in my world, most well known for being in Magic Mike and Magic
Okay.
Mike,
Yep.
the second movie. Yes.
Yeah, he's a
He,
beefcakey, dreamy guy.
yeah, him. Yeah, and they note that several times during the show. Yeah, he's the host of the show, and it's pretty much a combination of Deal or No Deal, the traditional game show, and Survivor. They bring, I believe,
Mhm.
12 to 16 contestants to start with to this island, and they're fighting for one winner to ultimately get the grand prize of millions and millions of dollars, whatever in each episode at the end the person that goes up against the banker is able to win for the rest of the team. That goes into the pot that goes later and starts accumulating for the ultimate winner to bring home. So they have this big cast. One of the cast members this season is I've never watched Survivor before, but for those that watch Survivor, Boston Rob is on this season. I guess he is a well-known evil person on Survivor who has won before. He's been on, they have one of the original case girls from like the first season of Deal or No Deal. She's on as one of the cast members. And then they have a lot of unique personalities. They have an owner of a pest control business. They have a woman in her late 60s, early 70s. They have this accountant. They have a poker player. So people from different walks of life brought to this island, and they're put in different challenges each episode, and the winner of the challenge will ultimately get to choose from the bottom two for who performed the least, I guess, who accumulated the least amount of money, because in each episode they have to get a certain number of points or retrieve a case that has the most money. The one that has the lowest dollar amount that gets put at the, I guess, on the chopping block, and then from there the winner of that challenge has to choose from one of the two losers ultimately who's going to go up against the banker. Now this is cool because what we're seeing is that people are forming alliances,
Hmm.
as with many of these reality TV shows. And what's happening is the person that goes against the banker is able to play a game of Deal or No Deal. And if he or she wins, they're able to choose someone who did not win the additional challenge because that person has immunity, but anyone else is up for grabs to send home. And if that
Okay.
person loses against the banker by having making a bad deal, as they would say, if you make a bad deal, you have a lower amount in your case than what was last offered to you by the banker. You go home as the person that was put on the chopping block and chosen to play Deal or No Deal at the end. So the whole goal is not necessarily to bring in, I mean, you want to bring the most money because that's more money towards the end of the show that the winner gets to have based on that pool that's accumulated from episode to episode. But your mindset is, I just need to have more in my case or take a better deal than what was in my actual case,
Yeah.
basically. So you want to make a good deal um, based on what's in your case versus what is actually being offered by the banker. So yeah, it's good so far. 5 episodes in. Half the episodes they guessed wrong, half of them they've guessed right. They've gone with their gut. A lot of it comes down to, as you know, with the normal show, just statistics and just probability of having more in your case versus what the banker is offering. But it's a cool twist on, with these other reality shows that are out there where you get to eliminate people
Yeah.
from episode to episode. And some of the challenges are pretty cool too. They're on a tropical island and then they keep on showing the yacht. They're like, this is the banker's island. He's bringing you to this island. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. But so far, I'm enjoying it.
I'll have to check it out. I when you said it, like I remembered, I just seen something the other day, but they were like the two like most famous people that were ever suitcase models are Meghan Markle,
Meghan Markle. Yeah.
and Chrissy Teigen.
Yes.
Like they're like the two like names. There's other
Yep.
people that have kind of gone on to do other things, but those are the two like probably most famous ones. But it's just funny, you see somebody like just coming up and where they start to get to where they're at. And
Right.
Meghan Markle went pretty far, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
So
She went to Suits after that, and then yeah,
she was
she
on
became.
she was on an episode of Fringe. If you ever watched Fringe,
I have not.
Fringe is great if you're into sci-fi at all. That show's fantastic. But yeah, she bounced around. She's on Suits, and now she's a princess. So
Now she's a princess, Duchess,
life
right?
was yeah,
Or
Duchess of Sussex,
yes.
and yeah, life's been real hard for her.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, it's an interesting show. I don't know how I guess they'll make more if it's successful, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I'm enjoying it thus far, and I love Deal or No Deal, so it's getting to watch it like every week and seeing. I mean, the largest dollar amount that I've seen like on the show is maybe like, I don't know, 5-10 million. It's gonna go way higher than that over time once
okay,
they build upon this pot. So it's cool to
how's
see like
Joe do as a host?
he's very handsome.
He is,
It's funny,
he is
like
though.
he's definitely is. No, everybody like it. Well, all the female contestants are like, "Huh, Joe, he's
Yeah,
just very attractive. I mean, kind of a random choice personally,
yeah,
but yeah, he's
yeah,
nice to look at. I guess maybe yeah, I'm sure that's one of the reasons why they chose him. But Howie is one of the producers, so that
okay,
makes
okay.
sense. I do miss hearing Howie ask like Deal or No Deal, and there are no suitcase girls in this. They just have a
Oh, okay.
random guy and a random girl take turns opening and closing cases and stuff. But yeah, I guess they couldn't afford to bring. I'm just kidding. They couldn't afford to bring all the suitcase girls too
Yep.
to this island. No, they just have two people, a guy and a girl, that just go ahead and like alternate and open cases. But yeah, I guess he's doing a good job. He's presenting all of
Yeah.
the challenges very well and running the end of the like pretty much the elimination, which is a deal or no deal situation, which is cool. So yeah, for anyone who likes Survive or anyone who likes Deal or No Deal or you're into game shows and you want to try something new, it's on NBC. New episodes come out on Mondays. Uh, I recommend it. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, let's check it out. Or any of the things that you have left uplifting at all?
Uplifting. Definitely not the play. Past Lives, I think, has like a good message. So let's go with that
Well, I was
next.
going to say let's save that for last because
Or let's say that for last.
yeah, because the other thing I've got isn't particularly
It's not.
chipper either. So
So are we going? Are we going like,
a
like
little
in
bit,
terms?
yeah. I'd
Okay.
say go ahead and do the play you saw because I think that
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So we're segueing for something really fun, like Deal or No Deal, to something that's super depressing and also sort of deals with money. For those of you viewers who don't know, I love Broadway. I enjoy playing the Broadway lottery, and I won again today. Saw Appropriate with Sarah Paulson. It started a few months ago. It's running through June of 2024. This is a play that is about a family, three siblings. Sarah Paulson playing the oldest sibling. Tony. Sarah plays Tony, who's the oldest sister, and she's got two brothers. She's got Bo, who was played by Corey Stoll, and then
Mm-hmm.
a younger brother who is sort of like this estranged relationship that this gentleman they haven't seen in 10 plus years who went away missing, and they come together after their father passes away weeks before, and they go to his home down in Arkansas, which happens to be on a plantation. They grew up in Washington, D.C., and their father was down there for his retirement years, give or take. And this trio between the three siblings show up at the time where they're like liquidating his assets and then are trying to decide what stays, what goes. And Tony, who is the oldest sibling played by Sarah Paulson, is the executor of the will. So she's pretty much putting things together. She's got a an adolescent son who's been in and out of juvie, so she's dealing with that and a recent divorce. So a lot of um, personal trauma on her end. And then Bo, played by Corey Stoll, is the second oldest. He's from New York. He lives a luxurious lifestyle in the city with his Jewish wife and their two kids, a daughter who's 13 and then a son who's 8. And then in the very beginning, we see this young woman and the youngest sibling, the brother, Frank, who now goes by Franz, come in one evening and he just shows up out of nowhere and they're like, where have you been the past 10 years? He's been hiding out in Portland, Oregon and fled after his own internal battles with drugs, alcohol. And we find out later more about his dark secrets. But after they all come together in this house, and they're packing up all of the father's belongings, preparing for an auction and pretty much a house sale so that they can get rid of his things. They come across a very dark secret that they didn't know about their father. And it is essentially an old album with photos that depict something quite horrific in American history, and they start to question their father's character. And it's a story of just kind of uncovering deep, dark secrets of the deceased and just figuring out, was this really who their father was? Is there something that they really didn't know? And how much hatred did their father have, if he did have hatred? Um, Really, who was this man beyond their father at the end of the day? And even just the internal struggles and relationships that are within that family right now between the three siblings, the youngest sibling who they hadn't seen in 10 plus years, and him coming to extend the olive branch to his older sister and older brother, saying, I'm sorry, I ran away and I was such a problem for many years, and I want to make things right moving forward. When they're questioning his intentions, is he here really to change, or is he actually wanting to be closer, and is he a changed man? Where Tony, the oldest sister, played by, or the oldest sibling in many cases, played by Sarah Paulson, she doesn't believe him one bit, and she's very much so a pessimist, and she's filled with a lot of anger and distrust. And it's a very dark play, a bit eerie at times. the house is almost filled with this like spooky type of energy. And there are certain points in the play where like it will just go dark out of nowhere, and they make you think like, are there dark spirits in that house in Arkansas? So uh, it kept my attention from start to finish. There is an intermission, so it's 2 acts. It was the acting was incredible, truly incredible seeing Sarah Paulson in a role that was so serious. And I mean, there was definitely comedic undertones and serious undertones throughout the play, but it really makes you think, especially when it comes to the death of a parent. It's already very hard in general, but then when you throw in other family trauma and then the liquidation of assets, which is a very tough topic for many families, it brings out the worst in people. And you see that in this play, how there's just a lot of anger and I think animosity that's swept under a rug that's finally just like ripped off like a band-aid in this play, and you really feel for all of the characters individually, and they do a really good job at portraying just family trauma, and then also this very topical secret that we find out about the father, which you don't know how true it is until the end. And it's just the big reveal is very kind of not out of nowhere, but it's definitely not what I had thought was going to happen in the show. So go see it. It's playing, for another few months if you're out in New York or if you're visiting. I do recommend it. Excellent acting. Very serious. There are a lot of parts in the play, though, you will laugh. Even I mean, the children are given some pretty funny lines too that are in the show. But yeah, very well done. I'm glad I won tickets to this. I don't think there's really anything bad I have to say about the show. Is the theater's gorgeous. Just everybody in the audience was pretty much very immersed in this whole experience really that they were creating on stage. And the nice thing about the set too, it's all inside. They don't change sets. It's just the house, the inside of the house. It's the living room. And then they have stairs going up to the top floor. So you just see people on the top floor overlooking down to the living room, and then that's it.
Hmm.
It's a very Southern home.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds really good. It looks like one of the characters was originally played by Elle Fanning. So
Oh,
from what I saw, it looks like this was on Broadway through 2014 and then left, and they just brought it
they
back.
came back. I think so. I didn't
Um,
realize that, but yeah, they did a really nice job with it.
yeah.
Yeah, it takes place, the actual um, play is supposed to take place the summer of 2010, 2011. So
Okay.
pre Black Lives Matters and um, major social movements.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
without giving too much away, yeah, you can figure that out a little, or put the pieces together
yeah.
as to where this plantation story goes and what, secrets they find out about their father to some extent. But yeah, uh, it was definitely a different type of play that I'm used to seeing. I mean, the play that I saw 2, 3 weeks ago, also very serious, but that's something from the late 1800s. And I mean,
Hmm.
very different theme there versus what we see here. This is more of a focus you know, on a family versus a community.
Hmm.
So yeah, go check it out if you're in New York City or you're visiting. It's a good one, and you have some pretty amazing talent as well.
All right. Yeah, it sounds really good. So, Sarah Paulson's one of those people that I feel like people finally kind of give her the credit she's due, but she hasn't always been like the person people talk about, but she's really, really talented.
She really
Uh,
is. And I think this play in particular, you get to see the depth that she brings to the stage and just how much talent she actually has.
yeah, that's awesome. All right, so I will transition into other drama real quick. So last year. I don't know what time around last year, but I saw a trailer for a movie called The Marsh King's Daughter, and
Okay.
it is funny enough sort of a Star Wars, not reunion, but the two main characters are recent Star Wars actors. You have Daisy Ridley, who's the main character of the Star Wars sequels, and then Ben Mendelsohn, who was kind of the main big bad in Rogue One. Ben Mendelsohn was also bad brother in Bloodline. Has been on. Wow, Bloodline was 7 years ago. Anyways, so he's really talented. Plays a good bad guy. The only other like actor that I even recognized, his name is Gil Birmingham. He is like he's kind of the go-to Native American actor right now. Like he's in everything. Like if you've ever seen Yellowstone, like he's kind of the head of the casinos and the reservation that they're kind
Hmm.
of butting heads with in that show. But he's a really good actor. He plays the local sheriff that kind of saves Daisy Ridley's character, Helena. And so the story goes, the movie is slower than it should be, I think. I think if they cut a little bit and picked up the pacing, it would go from, I think it's over just over 2 hours. Let me see real quick. It is 2 hours and no, it's excuse me, it's an hour and 49 minutes. So that's not too long, but it felt longer than that. And I think they probably could have got it down to closer to an hour and a half and just made it a little more exciting. Because like the first 25 minutes of the movie is her as a kid, and the gist of it is that they're living in a cabin in the woods. It's her dad, played by Ben Mendelsohn, and her mom.
Hmm.
And her mom's not really around, and Ben Mendelsohn is teaching her how to survive in the woods. And so they go hunting, they do all this stuff. He calls her Little Shadow because she follows him everywhere. And even though she's a little kid, like he takes like a ballpoint pen and a needle and he tattoos her in a bunch of different tattoos based on um the things that they've done. So she's got a big tattoo on her neck of a deer to mark her first kill. I don't remember the reasoning for it being a tree, but he's got a tattoo on her arm that is a tree because she missed a kill. And then
Hmm.
she's got little dots on her face, and he says to her that those are the only tears he ever wants to see on her face, right? Like he's trying to raise her to be tough and in the woods or whatever. And then right around the 20-minute mark, 25-minute mark, this guy shows up at their cabin when he's out hunting. So just the mom and the daughter are there. And he's like, hey, look, I got lost on the trail. I have no service.
Hmm.
Can I use your phone, or do you have a phone I can use? And the mom is like, we've been kidnapped. She's like, save us, save us, save us. And it turns out that, this Ben Mendelsohn's character, who is in the tabloids and in the media, going to end up being called the Marsh King because he lives out in the woods and in the marsh, kidnapped this woman with her kid and raised the kid as his own because he's a crazy person. So he gets locked
Right.
up. We finally bounce ahead, I don't know, 15, 20 years or so. And now Daisy Ridley's all grown up. Helena's all grown up. She has a daughter of her own. She's got a husband played by Garrett Hedlund, who's another name, actually. I forgot about him. And, her marriage to him is pretty decent, but she's never told him her history, right? So he doesn't know what she went through growing up. He's asked about her tattoos. He's seen them. She's kind of played them off as, I partied when I was young or whatever. And during a prison transfer, Ben Mendelsohn's character escapes. And so the rest of the movie now is her worrying about her family and thinking she's going to have to protect her family from her father because he's going to, come back and try and, um, you know, take what he thinks is his.
Okay.
And so, there's some really good drama in the middle where she really has to come clean to her husband, and say, these are the things that I went through. This is actually what this tattoo means, and this tattoo means, and she explains things to him. And there's a couple of times where she even says, she's like, I never thought I was going to have to tell you this. She's like, I didn't want to tell you this and I don't think she ever uses the word embarrassed, but it's just like it's so hard for her, and it's so much that she's tied to this man who kidnapped a woman and killed a because the dad also killed that man that showed up on his moped, right? Like, so he's a
Hmm.
murderer, he's a kidnapper, he, raised her. And so the rest of the movie is, her protecting her family and protecting herself from her father. Um,
Right.
and it's a decent drama. It's just like I said, it's just too slow. It could be, even if you just cut 15 minutes and just sped some stuff up, I think it would be a better movie. It's only around like a 5.9 on IMDb, so it's kind of middling. I'll have to look up Rotten Tomatoes to know for sure.
Hmm.
But it didn't do particularly great. Like, for me, I think it was the cast and the idea of the plot that really kind of drew me in, and I just really wanted to see it, but it didn't quite come off the way I had hoped it would from the trailers. It looks like is a 43% from the critics, but a 73% from the audience. So,
It's not great.
your mileage may vary. If you're okay with the pacing of it, I think you'll like it a lot more.
Hmm.
Um, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. The performances are solid. I think Daisy Ridley, she's British, so her accent, she's fighting it a few times, so it's a little noticeable. Ben Mendelsohn, I think, is also British, I think, but you don't notice his accent at all. He's done enough, I think, American stuff that he hides it
He's
pretty
able to
well.
master it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but it's not bad. It's not bad. It's okay. It's on Hulu right now if you feel like watching it. I don't know that I'd recommend it, but I also wouldn't tell anybody to not give it a shot. Just
Sure.
expect it to be a little slow in the beginning. Like, it's really, they lean hard into setting up the rest of the movie. And I think they could have cut that a little shorter. But otherwise, it's not bad, and I liked it enough, and it probably is carried by the fact that I like these actors a lot.
Yeah, I was
Um,
gonna say, is that why you gave it a try in the first place?
it
Because
is
of
definitely
the
why I gave it a
actors?
try in the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
place. I mean, it did look like an interesting kind of dark story too.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but yeah, it was definitely the actors that pulled me in. So, if you like these actors, then that's a good enough reason to go give it a shot. If you don't, maybe give it a shot if you feel like it. But like I said, be ready for that slow pacing in the beginning,
Right.
and a couple other parts. But when it's going really well, and near the end, it does finish better than it started. So, uh,
Okay.
yeah,
How long is it?
an hour and 48 minutes.
Okay, that's pretty
Yeah, it's
short.
not super long. Yeah, so
Got it. Nice.
yeah.
Did it originally come out on Hulu or
No, it was in theaters.
it was in actual theater? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know what the box office or budget was. It doesn't seem, I don't remember it doing particularly well. So I
Yeah.
assume it didn't blow up at the box office, but um, they probably put some money into that cast. Ben Mendelsohn he's a bigger name than he used to be. He's not the biggest name in the industry, but he's
Hmm.
kind of a big deal. And Daisy Ridley is teetering
Hmm.
on that edge right now. Like, she's about to come back to Star Wars, and she's made a couple of movies since. I know she kind of almost didn't act again after Star Wars, or took a little break because it became kind of a divisive fan base, and we're in the internet age right now where if there's a fandom that is mostly guys and you put a girl in the lead, they get all mad. And personally, I adored her and I thought she was fantastic. But
Hmm.
it's funny what'll trigger people sometimes. So,
Yeah.
um, but she's back. She did a movie with Tom Holland a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that looked kind of interesting because I think the gist of it was he could read all women's thoughts,
Hmm.
um, but not in a comedic way. Like, it was a dramatic movie, and either he could read women's thoughts, or all women could read his thoughts, or something like that. And he kind of fell into this village full of women, and it was this kind of
Hmm.
science fiction drama, and I don't remember what it was called, and I never saw it. So, obviously I'm a terrible fan here, but that one did look interesting. I just don't remember enough about it. Oh, Chaos Walking was what that one was called. I think it was based on a book.
Hmm.
Came out in 2021. Um, and but this one, The Marsh King's Daughter, is it's solid. It's decent. It's not great. I think, um, the one that you're about to talk about that was up for an Academy Award is probably a better movie. So, but this one's not bad. It's all right.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any of these actors. Oh, actually, I've heard of Garrett Hedlund.
Yeah, he just did something.
Headland.
Yeah, he was just in something where he was kind of a big deal. So he's kind of right there on the verge of blowing up too. He's been around for a while.
Okay.
Um, oh, I just saw him in Lawman, Bass Reeves, which was on
Hmm.
whatever network Yellowstone was on, and that was a great story. Bass Reeves is a real life. He was the first black sheriff east of the Mississippi, I think it is. Um, and so that show was really good. Not particularly uplifting either. But Garrett Hedlund, or yeah, is in that, and he's pretty good in that. Um, but otherwise, he's just been around a little bit. Like he's been in some stuff, but he hasn't really blown up yet.
Hmm.
But I did really like him in Bass Reeves. So
Well, I will, I guess, finish this off with a movie that I saw this past week. It's called Past Lives. It was one of the nominated films for Best Film this year for the Academy Awards. And I feel like out of all the films that was nominated, it was the least I knew about. And when I was logging into my Paramount Plus slash Showtime account, it came up as new release and recommended for me. So I thought, why not give it a try? Because obviously, if it's nominated for Best Film, I don't think it could be too bad. So I gave it a try, and took me about like 2 days to get through it because I was busy with work, but really enjoyed it. It's about uh, a woman who grows up in South Korea, and her first love story, her first love really, two childhood sweethearts who were both very studious and competitive with one another in the classroom. The woman's name, who's the protagonist, is Nora, is her American name, but in the beginning of the movie, she's has a Korean name, Na Young, and she is very much so developing feelings for Hai Sung, who is the male who she is classmates with. They are, like I mentioned, very competitive with one another school-wise, and they just really build this beautiful friendship together. And it shows them initially when they're 12 years old, and this film takes place over the course of 24 years. Yeah, 24 years. So it starts when they're age 12, so figure early middle school when they're in the classroom, and then they um, are walking home together talking about exams, and Na gets upset and starts crying when she places second in grades after an exam, and um, Hai Sung is very supportive of her and tells her like it's going to be okay, it's fine, like you can't always be first and you'll be fine. And when she comes home that day, her parents tell her we're going to be leaving and going um, west, and they end up moving to Canada. And before that, she has her parents ask her like, "Who do you have a crush on? Who do you like?" And she's like, "I like Hai Sung." And they're like, "Oh, let's like schedule a date." So they have her at 12 years old go on a date with Hai Sung with both of their mothers there, and Na Young's mother tells Hai Sung's um, mother that we're moving were immigrating, were leaving. Her parents are both, one's a writer and one's, I think, something else within like the creative industry. So they decide to leave Korea. And over the years, she ends up moving to New York. You see in the next scene once they move, and she is a writer like her father, and she's on the phone with her mom in Korea. Uh, it's speaking in Korean. At this point, her name is now Nora. She's no longer Nayoung. And she said to her mother, "What is that guy's name who I had like a crush on? What was his name again in Korea?" And she ends up finding him on Facebook and messaging him. And for a couple of months, well, first of all, he is like incredibly excited to because they go back and forth between Korea and then New York. And he's extremely excited to see and hear from her for the first time. And at that point, 12 plus years, so figuring they're in their 20s at this point. And they video chat day after day after day. She's doing post grad work for being a writer, and he is in college out in Korea studying engineering, and they're talking day and night. She's up at like, you know, late hours, and he's like in the middle of his work day. And it gets to the point where I think she just gets so mentally exhausted and tells him one day, like, I don't think we can talk anymore because there's no way I'm going to be able to go to Korea anytime soon. And the earliest that he said that he can come to the United States and visit her in New York is a year or 2 years because of his schooling. So she kind of puts the brakes on that and goes away to this residency where she meets her future husband, who is also a writer. And then years later, they go to Korea, but she never contacts him while she's married. And then another 12 years pass. So this is now when they're in their 30s. He comes to New York and looks her up and tells her that he's in the area. And she decides to meet up with him. And she tells her husband, "Hey, I'm going to meet up with like my childhood sweetheart. I haven't seen him in over 20 years." And it's interesting because they talk about this phrase in Korea that's called inyon, which means fate, provenance, pretty much like a past life, and how in many cases you can be rubbing elbows or bumping into someone in your life, and that could have been like your past partner in life, or that could be someone in, you know, a couple of years from now, or life from now. That could be your person. And in, you know, this day and era, you might just brush up against them in the middle of Times Square, and you're two separate people, and you have two separate lives, but that could be your person, you know, 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now. And that's kind of the story that they go along with, like meaning that Nayoung and Hae-sung were in a past life, or at least in this case here, as children, they were so, you know, very much so in love. And as she said, while they were video chatting, they had so much to catch up on and such, but she almost like grew out of like her old life in Korea as she came to America and came, you know, to well, initially Canada, but then America, and how her life was pretty much meant to be with her American husband. So, and I think there's certain points in the movie where her husband, his name, the character's name is Arthur, kind of feels this insecurity, as in like, is this woman with me, even though we've been married for 7+ years? Was I just like a way to secure a green card, or is this something that like she really will follow up on? But he handles himself in a very mature fashion because he lets her see this other guy while he's visiting and explore that. And there's a scene in the very beginning where they're sitting at a bar, she's in the middle, and she's talking to Hae-sung, and the husband's kind of just sitting behind her, and they're speaking Korean, and he's just sitting aside and people are looking across the bar and they're like, so who's her husband? Is that her husband and she's talking to her brother? Or is that her husband and that guy just happens to be a close friend of theirs? And just kind of to trying to understand this dynamic between these three people. And then you realize just how beautiful a relationship is, but also just that, and this is my takeaway from it, there is, I think in general, and I guess everyone has their own belief, but I think there's more than one person out there for you. And a lot of the times, timing and life in general, whatever you have going on, may determine who you ultimately end up with. But I mean, had she not moved to Canada and America, she very well might have been with Haisung the rest of her life, but that's not how her life was supposed to unfold. She was meant to be a writer, and he even said, you know, the way you are, you fit perfectly in America. Someone like you would not be able to grow in Seoul, Korea, based on just all of your aspirations. You were meant to go to America. You were meant to marry and be with someone like Arthur. And after watching some like very deep dive interviews and just like I'll always go after I watch a movie and I'll go on YouTube and I'll type in the title of the movie explained, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
past lives explained.
Yeah.
And they really talk about how like in a lot of like rom-coms, she would have probably left her husband and been like, I'm gonna go back to Korea. I want to be with you, Hae Sung. And like that's not reality, but I think this movie does share like more of like a logical side to love, if that makes sense, and
Mm-hmm.
not just being, you know, so I don't want to say careless, but just going on a whim because, oh, you once felt something for somebody and then completely dropping everything. Uh, yeah, so I appreciated that in general, but I think also just the fact that she was able to, I mean, they talked about it, you know, throughout the movie, what inyon means, and meaning that like you could have had a past life with this person, and how just how relationships in general will go one way or another, and just whatever ends up happening, it's the way it's meant to unfold.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a beautiful story in general, and just you get to watch both their lives and how much they grow as people throughout the film, which is great too, over the course of 24 years. And when they meet for the first time, they meet in, I don't know if Central Park, but they meet in a park where there's stone statues. And it's funny because that's the exact type of setup when their moms put them on this like not so it's
Mm.
not a blind date, but the supervised date. They were playing in this park where they're going through like this, not maze, but these, it's a park with these stone statues, very similar to where they meet in New York, which I'm sure was done intentionally. So
Yeah.
it just kind of brings them back to that romantic setting where they first fell in love, but just in a different country, which I thought was very well done. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It really is a good reflection on just love and past love and why things didn't work out, and it just definitely helps me even like reflect on my own, you know, romantic journey with people in my life and why things perhaps didn't work out, and you know the lessons that you learn from past relationships moving forward.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's cool. Like it does sound really good and really kind of intelligent in something that, you know, when you're talking about love and romance, stuff like that isn't always the most intelligent thing, right? Like it's very much from the heart and you don't act without thinking a lot of the time. So yeah, that's interesting. I was looking at the thing and I was trying to figure out because she looked super familiar, and it's because we just at my house did a New Girl rewatch, and she was one of Nick's girlfriends on New Girl.
Oh, really? Okay, that's funny.
Yeah, and then she had a long run on the morning show, which I'm pretty far behind on another Apple TV show, but um,
Hmm.
she that show is pretty good. So
Is
She's
that
doing
the
well
one
for
with
herself.
Jennifer Aniston
Yeah,
and
and Reese
Reese
Witherspoon.
Witherspoon?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, Greta Lee.
yeah. She's. I mean, looking at her IMDb, she's done a lot of work in the last like 4 years. Like
Right.
she's cranking stuff out big time. Some of it's voice actor work, like she did voice actor work in Strays. There's something called Housebroken where she's a voiceover. She was in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Hmm.
She is a hardworking girl. She's done lots of stuff. So
Yeah.
um, I can only assume we're going to see more of her soon. Unless she decides to stop. She's going to be in the new Tron movie, which is only in production, so probably won't come out till like next year. But she, yeah, she seems to be making a name for herself out there.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's, very rational with her, just her as a character too, as Nora. Um, yeah, she gives a lot of thought into her relationships and love and just reflecting on love. And I think it's just, as you said, just an intelligent way of looking at things and not as sometimes we see love being portrayed on TV and in movies nowadays. So it was actually very refreshing of a movie to watch. And the end scene, which I really appreciated. She cries when she's in Korea, and she mentions that when she moves west, that she had to become hard and not cry because people out in the West don't care about your feelings, basically. And it was just interesting to hear that. And then the end scene when she leaves and gives Haesung a hug before he jumps in his Uber to go back to Korea, she goes back home and her husband's waiting on the steps for her. And she runs into his arms and she gives him a hug and she starts to cry. And that's the first time it looks like she cries in a while. So, if anything, that visit, I think, kind of made her more vulnerable, but also allowed her to remember her roots that she left 24 years prior. So, it is a reminder to just, see how far you've come, but also never to forget where you came from in the first place.
Yeah. Sounds Yeah, it sounds really good. And I think looking at it too, I think this was the screenwriter's
First film.
first break. Yeah.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
was up for some awards. I think screenplay was one
Hmm.
of the ones that was up. So see how her career goes too. But yeah, sounds really good.
Yeah, I
So
enjoyed it.
all right, cool. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else?
That's all I got for this evening.
All right. It's good. We actually got a lot in, so I'm excited about that.
Okay, cool.
The only other thing that I've got, it's not anything that I can really review, but I saw something fun the other day. There's a horror movie coming out with Sydney Sweeney called Immaculate. She plays a nun.
Yeah, I
Well,
saw
this
previews for that.
I don't know if it looks good or bad, but one fun little bit of marketing that I saw, she sits down in a church with two female pastors
This movie has officially gone too far.
and watches the movie. And so it's like a 3 minute clip of just kind of their reactions to different parts of the movies
Oh,
or of the
wow.
movie. And it's fun. Like, they're
Okay, it's
definitely good
not
sports
cringe.
about it. Yeah. Uh, and it's just like, I don't know if the movie's good. I can't speak to any of that. I don't even know if I'm interested in seeing it until it, streams or
Yeah,
whatever. But it was fun to see. Like if you Google that little clip, it's fun to watch her watch these pastors watch it too, right? Because she's kind of
right.
like, whatever. And at one point, something startles one of the pastors, and then she's like, Jesus Christ, it's so funny because she's in a church,
Right.
but yeah,
She's trending so much now, and I mean,
she's
I
doing
guess it's
everything. I saw something that listed like the projects she has in the works, and it's like 8 projects, and like they just like halted production on season 3 of Euphoria
I
because they
saw
didn't like the
that.
scripts, and so they kind of released the actors temporarily so they
Yeah,
can
go
go.
do your own
Yeah,
projects. Yeah.
yeah. Like
Uh,
she is. The more I read about her the more I kind of respect her work in the game. Like I haven't seen her do anything where I'm like, she's a great actress, but
I was
she
gonna say
just,
that honestly, I just don't. Sorry, I'm not that impressed by her.
yeah, like I feel the same way. It's like she plays in Euphoria and in
Anyone
White
but you.
Lotus.
Oh, White Lotus. Okay.
She plays kind of the same like shitty teenage character in both of those, and she does
Mm-hmm.
that really well. I haven't watched anything but you yet, but that
Yeah.
one that did really well at the box office. Like people really
Yeah.
enjoyed that. And I'm really actually curious about that because I think it's a different character than she's portrayed anywhere else. Like she's got some
Right.
humor and all this other stuff. So I'm curious to see how she does with that. Because I feel
Yeah. I
like,
saw it. I just thought she was, I mean, she plays a girl who, you know, is goes on dates and, you know, I just didn't think she didn't blow it out of the water for me.
yeah,
Like I just thought other people could have played that. I wasn't like, wow, she's such a great actress.
yeah,
And I mean, in Euphoria, like she's just kind of like a someone who is the complete opposite, actually, of Greta, Nora, but from past lives. She's really done with love. She's just desperate and needy
yeah.
and very sex driven and just like an immature high schooler and just yeah, just I don't know. I
Yeah,
just whatever. I have my own opinions. Like I think she's a beautiful woman
mhm.
and like good for her. Like I'm happy she's successful and stuff, but I'm just not like, oh, she's gonna be something big. This is gonna be the next Emma Stone or Jennifer Lawrence or like I don't see any
Yeah,
awards coming up anytime
she's
soon.
definitely not that. I'm curious to see where her career goes because like seeing interviews with
Sure,
her, like she's not afraid of anything, which is I think what it does impress me about her. Like she's already
sure,
said she's like I'm not going to stop doing shows with nude scenes if that's what they want in the shows that I'm doing, you know,
yeah,
and whatever. Like she's like I don't care. She's like I look good. What, you know, like what it doesn't bother.
right,
But also she's like she's making smart decisions on the other end of it too. Like she did Madam Web, which was a garbage film, but
right,
she literally said she's like, but this gets me in the door with people at Sony. So like
true,
now I know this producer, and this producer. So she's like, yes, she's not probably not going to be Jennifer Lawrence or Emma Stone or any of these young actresses that are really are great, but she's going
right.
to be somebody that works a lot. Like she is like from an if you take the business side of acting, she's going to have a
Mm-hmm.
nice career. You know, like she's gonna go a little ways before she decides she doesn't want to do it, or you know maybe she'll take a little break. You know, hone her craft and come back and do something like truly impressive. Um, but she's not. I mean,
Right.
she's not a bad actress, right? Like she's okay. She's just not great.
She's just not good. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. She's not great or good in my opinion. Sorry. I'm not yeah, I'm not impressed by her. I watched her host SNL and they just gave her like the worst skits.
Yeah.
It's just like anyone could have hosted this. I wasn't impressed. Um yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I think it comes out
I
of I really believe right now, and it's because she's young and she wants to be famous and she wants to be rich, but she'll say pretty much yes to anything. Like I don't think, and to like her
she can't
limited
be picky
credit,
at this point.
but she's not afraid of it either. Like
Yeah.
she's okay with it, and so I think if she gets to work with the right people in the right place, she may improve. Like you know it
Sure.
you know, at some point she'll do a movie with somebody on the level of like a Meryl Streep or something like that, and maybe turn the page, or maybe won't, you know, and that'll be the defining moment. But you know, for
Yeah.
now, she's playing pretty safe parts that are getting her money. Like, and so, like I said, from the business side of it, like I respect her game. Like she's in there and just cranking away at it.
Yeah, but I think her particular like personality and acting, just based on her resume, I think she'll do well in this horror film because it is sort of a horror
Hmm.
film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, her as a nun that ends up growing a baby through immaculate conception. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a it's not a brilliant idea, right? It's not something
No.
it's not gonna be up for Oscars or anything like that, but hey, she'll make money doing it.
Oh, she will for sure.
So
Just she reminds me a little bit like I feel the same way about Dakota Johnson.
yes,
Like
yeah,
another one who's like it's not even about a pretty face though. It's just, just seeing them on screen, I'm like, this isn't acting to me. Like you're
yeah.
just yourself, but in like in a film in nicer clothes. I don't know.
I'm
Like
curious. She has one coming out with Sean Penn, and it looks like the
Dakota.
yeah, and it looks like the entirety of the movie takes place in a cab, or most of the movie. He's the cab driver, and like they're kind of talking about the choices that she made in her life and things like that. And it
Okay,
looks like a solid drama because Sean Penn is a great actor.
sure.
Um, and so I'm curious to see if she really can act because she's the same way. Like I've never seen Dakota Johnson something where I was like, oh, she's really
Wow.
good. Yeah, I'm like, she's here because of her mom and dad. Like,
Yeah, but also like when you get your career really started and it's from 50 Shades of Grey, like I'm sorry.
yeah,
It's just it's that's not the film that you're like, wow, this woman has so much talent. It's more just like, wow, this woman has a really nice body and a nice face. And
yeah,
it's actually really sad though, because obviously I want to, be like, sex positive, pro women in different roles, but I'm also like, I mean, Sydney Sweeney in Euphoria is like everything that like a mother does not want her daughter to be, quite
yes,
frankly.
yeah,
Like ugh, it's just total like exploitation of just a bunch of bad stuff,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't know. Um, and the Anyone But You, it's like a classic, portrayal of just like dumb love and women that are making, silly mistakes when it comes to love. I don't know. I did like the film, but I wasn't like, oh my God, amazing acting. It gave me a lot of laughs. Glenn Powell. I mean, like I wasn't like, wow, he's an amazing actor too. It's just one of those type of films. It was cheesy, like a cheesy girls' night to watch. So
yeah. It looked
I don't,
like a late '80s, early '90s rom-com to me, like
a little
in
bit,
the ways that
yeah,
it set things up and things like that. So
yeah. But like whenever I say this, like I challenge people to change my mind. I want people to change my mind.
yeah,
I want to say, it's not going to be like oh, she's never going to be a big thing. It's just at this point, I'm not impressed. I want to see
yeah.
something that
I'm waiting for
impresses
that
me.
moment too. 'Cause I don't want to say she doesn't have it in her, but I
Right,
just I haven't seen anything from her that where she has blown me away. But at the
right.
same time, like she's putting herself into good projects. Not everything is, but Euphoria
Sure.
is a great show. White Lotus is a great show. She was very like box office successful in Anyone But You. I know her and Glenn Powell are already talking about the next rom com they're going to do together.
Oh,
Like
okay.
yeah, so
Because it was so successful.
yeah,
Yeah.
like they're kind of like the Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson, thing,
Hudson.
right? Um,
Gotcha. Interesting. Or Kate Winslet and Leo DiCaprio, who
yeah,
did Revolutionary, which was a complete trash
so
film. But yeah, no, that's good to know. But I don't know. It's not like Zendaya, who I'm like, wow, she can actually act
yeah, yeah.
fairly well. And even like Jacob Elordi, like he crushed it as in Priscilla as playing Elvis Presley. Like
Hmm,
I thought
hmm,
he did just as good of a job as Austin Butler,
hmm.
um, playing Elvis. I think he's kind of a jerk. Like if you hear him interviewed and just like everything I've read about him, like in the tabloids, he's like a complete player, but like he played a really good Elvis, very convincing. Like, I don't know. So I don't think it's like a Euphoria thing. I think it's a her thing or perhaps
Oh,
an
for sure.
opportunity. It's an opportunity thing because like Zendaya she can act. I've seen like her
Yeah,
in some good
she's
stuff.
great.
She is really great. So I don't know. I want to I want to be proven wrong, Kevin.
Yeah,
I want to see her in a
I'm in the same
project
boat.
and
Like I'm waiting for that thing that I see that I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for that
she
moment,
has it.
and it may not happen, but I keep hoping that for her that it does because she's working hard. She may not be working great, but she is working hard. She's
Yeah.
putting out a lot of content. So we'll see where that ends up for her because you know, at some point either she'll burn out from doing, you know, 8
All those
projects in a
roles.
year, or she'll get better and then pare it down and then, you know, cruise for a while. You know, you never know. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
because like anytime I see like a Jennifer Lawrence movie, even when she's been out of it for a while, I'm just like, she still got it. She's just
yeah,
so captivating, and she's just a fun. Like, if have you ever watched Jennifer Lawrence interviewed?
yes, she's one of
She's
my favorites ever.
hysterical.
She's
She's so
she's a
funny.
fool. She's an absolute fool, and
Yeah,
she's fine with it. Like it all comes down to like that first time she ate shit at the Oscars, and she was just like,
and she
cool,
fell. Yeah,
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 and from then on, like whatever she did, like whatever weird thing happened to her, she just rolled with it, and you know, and
right.
she's so charismatic, like and somebody like Sydney Sweeney or Dakota Johnson, they don't have that. Like they're not bad at interviews. They're just
Right.
like Jennifer Lawrence eats up the stage. Like she's there and she is the star. Like it doesn't really matter. Like
100%.
yeah. So
100%. It's just, yeah, even like there was a movie that I saw last year with Jennifer Lawrence and Matthew Broderick and let me pull up the film. It was so funny. It recently came out on Netflix, so I watched it with a friend. It was the second time I saw it in theaters, and then I saw it recently on. It's called No Hard Feelings. That movie, have you seen that, Kevin? No Hard
oh
Feelings.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's where she dates the teenager, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That movie
It was
is
hilarious.
hysterical. I think it was the funniest movie I had seen in a very long
Hmm.
time. She's so good. She is so, this is the first time I've seen her in like an actual comedic role. And she's herself, but
Yeah.
she is that crazy. Like she actually
Hmm.
is,
Oh
I
yeah.
think, that crazy and wild. And I just thought that was the perfect character for her to play
Yeah.
in this comedy. And it just even shows, even like in a comedic role, she still kicks ass.
Yeah. Yeah. She's just amazing. Like, and she really is. And she's a scene stealer. Like everywhere she is, like you put her in a movie and you know she's the star. Even when she did
100%.
Passenger, I think Passengers, is that what it's called? Chris Pratt.
I never
Like,
saw it, but I know it's a space movie, right? Yeah, she's just
yeah,
something else. And she's like a new mom too. And I mean, same thing with Emma Stone. She's a new mom and they're just cranking out movies left and right. But Emma Stone's interesting because she started on the first two movies that I saw her in were um Super Bad and
hmm.
Easy A. And like
Yes,
when
and
you
I
watch
love
those,
Easy A.
Easy A is good. That's when you get to see like her as an actor, um, like break out of her shell. She's also the protagonist. But like in Superbad, you wouldn't think like, oh, this, woman
Hmm.
with like half head of bangs, right? Or like side bangs who plays, this high schooler who throws a house party is gonna be a future Academy Award winner,
Yeah,
have two um, you know, Best Actress awards in the next 15 years. Like they put her in good roles, but she just
yeah, she really
proved
works with it.
herself. She worked for them. She proved herself. Like I know I spoke about it a couple weeks ago, but like Poor Things, that role, she was so good playing someone with a childlike brain in an adult body. So yeah, it's interesting to see a lot of these actors and actresses develop and seeing like what promise they have in them over time. I mean, even like Timothy Chalamet, I'm not a big Timothy Chalamet fan. Like I know a lot of people are go crazy over him. They're like, he's so hot. And I'm like, he's fine. But I saw him in Willy Wonka. I know you guys said he's amazing in Dune. I've seen him in Call Me by Your Name. The guy
Hmm.
knows what he's doing. He's very talented and I can't take that away from him. He
Yeah,
is so talented. So, but yeah, there's a lot of good actors and actresses out there that are, still little seeds that are gonna
yep,
bloom and make more work and continue to, sprout and spread their branches.
yeah, yeah. I'm excited for that stuff. So cool. Well, all right. With all of that,
Yes.
I will say thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you for listening. And I think Andrew will be back next week. I can only imagine he's going to have a boatload of stuff to talk about because he's been off for a couple of weeks. Thankfully, it's all for good reasons, and he's in good health and all that jazz. He just had a little birthday celebration to have this week, so I guess he's allowed to do that. You know, should be show first, but whatever. And so, yeah, well, we'll have a jam-packed episode next week, and we'll see everybody next week.